How militaries can paralyze an enemy without crossing the border. War used to be simple. Armies marched, cannons fired, borders were crossed. But in the modern world, the battlefield has shifted. Today, a nation doesn't need to launch massive invasions to defeat its enemy. It can paralyze its adversary's military, economy, and society without a single soldier crossing the border, using intelligence, technology, economics, and sheer strategic innovation. This is the new face of conflict. A world where you can win a war without firing a shot, where a nation's military might be rendered ineffective while its cities stay intact, and its people never see an invading army in their streets. That's not theory, that's reality. War without bullets. An introduction. Imagine this scenario. Without warning, a nation's power grid collapses. Major cities go dark. Communications networks fall silent. Bank transactions freeze. Military command networks can't talk to field units. Air defense radars go blind. Fuel supplies can't be tracked. Pilots don't receive orders. Troops stand still. All this happens without a missile, bomb, or soldier ever crossing a border. Key characteristics of borderless warfare. Operates below threshold of armed conflict. Article 5, NATO non-triggering. Achieves strategic effects without territorial conquest. Targets vulnerabilities in civilian-military nexus. Maintains plausible deniability for attacker. Compresses timelines, effects in hours versus months of traditional war. In essence, these strategies flip the ancient notion of war on its head. Victory now comes through disruption rather than destruction. Paralysis rather than pulverization. Cyber warfare. The digital strike. At the heart of modern borderless warfare is cyber warfare. Attacks launched from computers, networks, and digital systems rather than battlefields. These strikes don't need soldiers. They need code. In today's world, everything from military command networks to civilian infrastructure is digital and interconnected. That makes them vulnerable to attacks on critical infrastructure, power grids, transportation systems, financial systems, communications networks, and more. Global cyber warfare statistics. 2023. 1,200 plus significant cyber attacks on critical infrastructure globally, $8 trillion projected global cost of cybercrime. 90-plus nation-states possess offensive cyber capabilities, average cost per successful infrastructure breach, $4.45 million detection time for advanced persistent threats, 21 days average. Cyber attacks that can paralyze a nation. Here's how cyber warfare can cripple an enemy without ever firing a bullet. Number 1. Power grid disruption. Electricity is the backbone of every modern society. A successful attack on a nation's electrical grid can plunge entire regions into darkness, freezing services that depend on electricity, hospitals, airports, military bases, fuel pumps, communication centers. Real-world example, Ukraine power grid attacks 2015-2023. December 2015, sandworm attack cut power to 230,000 people for 6 hours. 2016, in-destroyer malware specifically designed to target power infrastructure. 2022-2023, Russia launched 1,000-plus missiles, drones targeting Ukrainian energy. Infrastructure, disabling 50% of capacity at peak. March 2022 cyber attack. Attempted to disable Kyiv substations simultaneously with missile strikes. Cyber attackers can target industrial control systems and supervisory control and data acquisition networks that operate power grids, causing massive outages. 2. Communications and command breakdown. Modern militaries depend on secure communication systems for command and control. A well-designed cyber strike can jam, corrupt, or take over these systems, making it impossible for commanders to issue orders or receive intelligence. Real incidents. 2022 Viasat hack. Hackers disabled 30,000-plus satellite modems across Europe hours before Ukraine invasion, disrupting Ukrainian military and civilian communications. 2007 Estonia cyber attacks. Sudden DDoS attacks paralyzed government, banking, and media websites for 3 weeks, demonstrating vulnerability of digitally dependent nations. Disrupting military networks, blinds perceived battlefield awareness even without traditional combat. 3. Financial crash and economic instability. Cyber attacks against banking systems can freeze transactions, corrupt financial records, and disrupt stock markets, creating panic and economic chaos. Banking system vulnerabilities. SWIFT network, global financial messaging, handles $5+ trillion daily, targeted by North Korea's Lazarus Group. 2017 NotPetya. Russian military malware disguised as ransomware caused $10+ billion in global damage, crippling banks, shipping, and pharmaceutical companies. Even short-term instability can force political leaders to divert attention away from the battlefield toward domestic crisis management. 4. Infrastructure sabotage. Transportation systems like railways, air traffic control, shipping logistics, and pipelines are all controlled digitally. If hackers can manipulate these systems, they can freeze logistics and supply chains for both civilian and military operations, effectively stopping movement without physical attack. Transportation infrastructure attacks. Colonial Pipeline Darkside ransomware shut down 5,500 miles of pipeline supplying 45% of U.S. East Coast fuel, causing panic buying and fuel shortages. $4.4 million ransom paid. Lot Polish Airlines. Hackers compromised ground systems, grounding 10+ flights for 5 hours, stranding 1,400 passengers, demonstrating air travel vulnerability. Economic blockades and sanctions. While cyber attacks are direct, another way to paralyze an enemy is indirect, through economic warfare. A nation's military doesn't operate in isolation. It depends on an economy that supplies fuel, parts, food, currency, and public support. Economic strategies that can paralyze a country. 1. Financial sanctions. Sanctions can cut a nation off from global banking systems, restrict its ability to trade, and freeze assets held overseas. When a government cannot finance its military or economy, its war machine slows. Russia sanctions case study, 2022-2024. $300+ billion Russian central bank reserves frozen in Western institutions, 10+ major Russian banks disconnected from SWIFT system. Russian ruble fell sharp in 48 hours after sanction. Announced force. Russia to trade in yuan, rupees, and barter arrangements. Defense production impacted. 70% reduction in tank production due to semiconductor component shortages. Powerful countries often use sanctions to pressure rival regimes without ever firing a shot. 2. Blockades and trade restrictions. Naval blockades or trade embargoes can cripple key imports, fuel, technology, food, and make sustained military operations impossible. Yemen Houthi blockade. Saudi-led naval blockade reduced fuel and food imports, contributing to humanitarian crisis and forcing negotiated settlements. Naval blockades have been used historically to weaken nations economically. Today, they are as effective with satellites and surveillance as they were with ships and cannons. 3. Economic coercion. Sometimes a nation doesn't even have to impose outright sanctions. Threats of tariffs, investment restrictions, and trade embargoes can force policy changes or diplomatic concessions from adversaries without any military engagement. Russian rare earth leverage controls 40% of global palladium, using export threats for geopolitical leverage. Propaganda, psyops, and information warfare. If a military wants to paralyze an enemy, it can start with their perception of reality. Information warfare. The battle for hearts and minds. Modern warfare isn't just fought on battlefields. It's fought in the minds of citizens, soldiers, and leaders. Nations now engage in information warfare and psychological operations to influence public opinion, sow confusion, erode trust, and fracture political unity. These tactics can include disinformation campaigns, spreading false narratives to create chaos and distrust, censorship or disruption of news outlets, controlling the flow of information, targeted propaganda, reaching specific demographics to sow dissent. Why is this effective? Because a military's will to fight is inseparable from the will of its people and leaders. If citizens doubt their government, troops feel unsupported, or commanders fear political backlash, a battlefield can collapse without a single shot fired. Electronic warfare and signal disruption. On the battlefield, communications and sensors matter. A nation might have advanced weapons, but if its systems can't communicate, coordinate, or detect threats, it becomes vulnerable. Electronic warfare involves using the electromagnetic spectrum to jam, deceive, or disable enemy electronics, radar systems, and communications. These methods can blind an adversary without ever engaging in traditional combat. Blockades and strategic chokes without invasion. You don't need an army on the ground to strangle an enemy's capabilities. Control key routes, and you control movement. Naval blockades and economic exclusion zones have been used for centuries, but today they are strategically augmented by satellites, drone monitoring, and cyber controls that enforce compliance beyond borders. Strategic choke point vulnerabilities. 80% of global oil trade passes through 8 major choke points, Strait of Hormuz. 21 million barrels a day, 21% of global oil. Iran can close with mines, missiles, Strait of Malacca. 25% of traded goods. 50% of oil to China, Japan, vulnerable to blockades, Suez Canal. 12% of global trade. 10% of seaborne oil. 2021 Ever Given blockage cost $9.10 per day. Think of a powerful navy controlling a sea lane that provides most of an adversary's imports. Even without firing a shot, that nation's economy, and by extension its military, can be starved of fuel, weapons parts, and essential imports. Case examples of borderless paralysis. Let's visualize how this works. Iran and tanker GPS spoofing. Iran has used advanced signal manipulation to disrupt the navigation of foreign tankers in strategic waterways, not by firing weapons, but by spoofing satellite signals, forcing ships off course, and creating geopolitical leverage. Documented incidents, 2019, 20-plus ships reported false GPS positions in Strait of Hormuz. Ships showed locations inland, Iran airports, city, while actually at sea. Insurance costs increased 400% for Hormuz transit, forced manual navigation, slowing transit 30-40%. The war without borders. As technology continues to evolve, with AI, autonomous systems, quantum computing, and space-based systems, borderless warfare will become even more prominent. Emerging borderless capabilities. AI-driven cyber attacks. Autonomous malware adapting in real time to defenses, quantum computing. Breaking all current encryption within years. Space warfare. Anti-satellite weapons disrupting GPS. Communications. Reconnaissance. Biotechnology. Engineered. Pathogens as covert biological warfare. Deepfake technology. AI-generated false video/audio of leaders creating political crises. If this video changed how you think about modern warfare, and how nations can be crippled without crossing borders, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell for more explosive insights. Drop a comment below. Do you think future wars will be won more by cyber and economic tactics than by traditional armies? Stay informed, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next Strategic Breakdown.